Basically, what we're doing here, Lowell, is Alex and I used to grab coffee and talk about movies. And when we get bored of listening to each other, we were curious about what other DPs have to say about the craft of cinematography and how they do it. Because Alex and I we worked together for a long time. He's a cinematographer on his own right now, but before he was my camera operator for in a bunch of projects. So we know each other
Cool.
well. We know how we feel about all this stuff. But we were really curious about how you guys feel about making movies and what's your style and what's your technique and what's your process. So I saw recently your movie with M. Night Shyamalan, Knock on
Mm-hmm.
the Knock on the Cabin, and Topside, and those. I
Mm-hmm.
think those two movies are brilliant cinematography wise.
Thanks, man.
I rewatched Topside this morning and I almost cried. It's a
Wow.
really tough movie to watch, but in a very good
Yeah, totally.
in a very good way. I think what you
Yeah.
guys did with the camera and with the light is fantastic.
Thanks,
So
man. Yeah, I made the movie, or we made the movie before we had kids, and now we have kids, and now I'm actually like scared to watch it because I think
it's
it
well
will
that's
That's the
what
destroy
first thing
me.
that I told me. I was like, I just finished Topside earlier this morning for the first time, and I've got 3 kids, and I was like, I'm like angry, like
Yeah,
affected,
yeah,
very
totally.
affected, like like you said, in a good way. You guys did your job, but it's a rough one.
Yeah, totally.
it's what
Well, I'm glad it resonated with you guys.
yeah
Thanks.
something. There's two things that I loved about the movie is how you shot the lower part, the tunnel part. It's
Mm.
I mean your work, how you work with the low lights and with the shadows and with the darkness over there. It's remarkable.
Thanks,
And
man.
the other thing that I really liked is your camera work in that
Mm.
movie. Did you operate the camera in that movie?
Yeah, that was a big part of it, was that the directors wanted a really, really intimate set. And so the fewer sort of, I don't know, I guess for lack of a better word, collaborators or just bodies, the fewer bodies we had to have in the sort of room where the deal gets made or where the sausage gets made, whatever the euphemism is, like the better. They just wanted it to be really intimate and like, I think the thing they wanted to protect, every director, I think what makes a director and what makes a movie is that each director has intentions and has very clear things they want to hold dearly. And one director it might be um, time. They want a lot of time on set. They want the most amount of days to make the movie. Like Ruben Ostlund, right? Like that's one of his priorities. Is like I want an entire day to shoot one scene, and that's why his movies are the way his movies are. And for these directors, it was like the kid's performance was, the paramount thing to protect, and they thought part of what might help that performance is like, yeah, if the little girl didn't have like 40 cute crew members behind the camera and 40 eye lines to then distract her or people to distract her. So often it was like me, the boom mop, and then one of the directors was the lead actor, Selena Held. She played the mother to Little, to Shayla Farmer. So it was like 4 people in the room pretty much at all times. And I think she kind of, and sometimes the boom mop wasn't even there. Sometimes the boom was just mounted on the camera. So, it was often just truly the 2 actors and me, or me and the boom op, so that there would be as few distractions, as few noises that weren't organic to the scene that would then throw her eye line. So that was, it's a long-winded answer to your question of yes, I operated the camera because then, there's one last person I have to be like, hey, operator, move this, and then the walkie isn't working, and then I have to interrupt the scene, or something, So it just let us like kind of stay in it, and that's kind of the way me and these directors have worked for a few years prior to Topside. So we had sort of a methodology kind of, built into our process.
Hmm. I'm assuming, again, assumptions, and correct me if I'm wrong. Did that carry over into the lighting philosophy as well?
Most definitely, yeah. So it was sort of a, light the space mentality, if at all. So, there's definitely a lot of lit spaces, and that whole tunnel that you guys were talking about at the beginning of the movie, that's pitch black if you don't light it. So you had to have lights for sure. But it's a lot of practicals. Okay, this light can do double duty. It can be something we can look at, and it can be something that lights them as long as they're close enough to it, or something that silhouettes them if they're not close to it, or depending on the angle. So, yeah, it was sort of like, don't let the reason this shot doesn't work is because there's like a C stand in the corner of the frame, and I can't pan that way, even though the little girl walked off her mark. There's a C stand now in the shot. It was like that's just not acceptable. And it was kind of more like, let's make this a documentary. Let's sort of like set the stage and then work how a documentarian works, and do a really long take. And maybe within that take, you get the wide, the medium, and the close up without ever cutting or reslating. And, you kind of just run the scene again. And because one of the actors is the director, she can kind of help guide the little girl's performance in that way.
It actually, I think that the philosophy behind it fits perfectly to the movie that you guys were shooting. I mean, I can't really imagine that movie shot in any other way. And I think that part of the effect that it made in me when I watched it, that anxiety that created in me, it wasn't only because of the kid and the kid being lost and the mother being a junkie. It's just because the camera and the way the movie is lit, it was helping that to happen to me. I mean, when they go out, when they go up to the top side, you guys created even a more horrible place than the tunnels, which if that is possible.
Exactly,
It's like you go out with the girl and the mother, and it's horrible up there. And I think that's most in this particular case, it's mostly you who created that, and I think that's truly amazing.
Well, thanks. I mean, I can't take full credit for it because, like, for example, in that scenario, we picked the busiest intersection we could find, right? So that's something that is not necessarily what the camera is doing, but just pre-planning and saying, hey, we want the closest thing to Times Square that we can get. Like, what is the most... They could have come up any subway, and it might have had the same effect. So part of it was, like, the location scouting. Part of it, obviously, is the sound design. But, yeah, I mean, to your point, that was the intention, was like, hey, let's make it a cacophony of stimuli. And, like, this little girl has never experienced any of these things. Let's kind of experience them as if they were a little jarring, and a little scary, and like she needs her mom because of the scary world that she's entering. So yeah, we emphasize that with a little bit longer lenses. We use some kind of filters that I put in front of the lens that kind of help disorient a little bit more and bring in more light flares. So yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate it, but I'm often it's hard for me to take a compliment and just to invite you into, like, there's other stuff going on, and I know we're all trying to hit the same target, and I can say, okay, let's do the 85 to get to the target, and let's get the most actually chaotic place, where it's not just a 4-way intersection, it's like a 6-way, so it's all of us trying to get that reaction out of you guys.
I loved it. I mean, you pop up and immediately you get the sense that, like, she's been in the dark the whole time because the highlights kind of go, her pupils dilate. Yeah. It's too much. Practically, like, filming in a environment like that, was it, how did that, like, strip down camera, kind of like, hey, we have to be as tiny as possible to hide in the crowds, or was most of it controlled by you guys?
No, it's funny. It's funny. Someone just reminded me, I was hanging out with our first AD from the movie, and he reminded me that was our day one of filming. That was like the first scene we filmed. You would not think that. Wow. But part of what we were fighting on the shoot was just weather. It's supposed to be a winter movie, and day one of filming was like April 26th or something. So late, spring. It's not winter anymore. And so just not being able to see trees and having certain limitations, and like knowing that there's going to be a bunch of background that are just real people, and we need them to be wearing coats. So part of it was just like we need winter as soon as possible. Um, and I think it was just sort of like a rip the band-aid off, like get the kind of craziest scene out of the way when everyone's the freshest. Um, Even though maybe that's like counter to what most people do. um, and yeah, to answer your question, Alex, it was like, yeah, the whole time the camera was pretty stripped down. I don't think it was too dissimilar from any other build, but yeah, it was just me holding the camera, filming close to sunset-ish. We got like a kind of cloudy day, but kind of just doing the beat over and over, just like walking through the intersection and walking through the intersection and, doing it safely, but doing it again, just like me, the boom op, and the first AC, Stacy, who had, just like a handheld monitor and her focus, and me with the camera. And I think we had a second AC near, yeah, I think Mayo was with us too, who would maybe like help grab something if needed. But it truly was like, have the least amount of crew, again, because that's sort of our philosophy, and two, it's a crazy intersection, and like you don't want anyone to get hurt, you don't want anything bad to happen, the fewer bodies the better. And we had like a support vehicle and a support video village around the corner in a van, so we could do resets and looks and all that stuff. But yeah, for the most part, it was just like, okay, roll and just walk through the intersection a bunch, and okay, get the leading stuff. And it, again, because the director is one of the actors, she could kind of help with the performance. A lot of it was just holding the girl, but she could tell if the girl was getting stressed out, okay, let's go into the scene where she puts her down and she talks to her and tries to comfort her, and then pick her back up. And if she's not, if she's just like being a kid and just looking around, then okay, let's get those shots, So it was pretty fluid. It's kind of a miracle it worked out in hindsight. But yeah, it was a cool, fun, just sort of like throw a little bit of caution to the wind, but also throw like control to the wind a little bit, and understand that this, we're going to shoot this for an hour and we're going to get, 30 seconds of the movie here, but we might have to roll for an entire hour straight to get that, and that was sort of the process.
You mentioned several times in the last 10 minutes the philosophy that you created with these two directors. It's something that you guys have been like building up from the first short films, and every time you work with them, it's kind of the same shooting style, or it was just specifically for this movie, and you have you've done different things with them.
I mean, so their names are Logan, George, and Celine Held. They're a married couple. When we first met, they were just starting to make shorts. Like, they'd been actors in the past, and they were starting to make shorts as director-writer duo. And so, we sort of found a little bit of an approach as we went. We tried different things. Like, on one short film, we did some dolly and zoom stuff. But I think for the most part, like, we kind of kept coming back to our influences. Like, we didn't make this wholly up. We aren't the first filmmakers to work this way, but we liked filmmakers like Andrea Arnold, who made a short film called Wasp and a feature called Fish Tank, and those films were huge inspirations for us. Or like the Safdie brothers. I think we went and saw Uncut Gems in theaters when we were making this movie, and we were like, yes, like, this is it, And so, we had influences, and then I think the ultimate proof in the eating of the pudding was we made a short film called Caroline, which was similar in that Celine played the mother again, and there were 3 kids, and there was like a sort of dire situation, and we filmed that movie in this sort of style, and it did very well, and it was this sort of like anxiety cinema, edge of your seat kind of thrill ride, emotional roller coaster that all of us were really proud of and thought worked really well. And so I think in a lot of ways, I thought of Topside as like kind of like, okay, Caroline, like whatever worked in Caroline, like carry that over, and if we can add to it or make better tweaks, cool, but like that's the core. And I think all of us were like, yeah, what worked with Caroline, we want to kind of transfer that to Topside.
That's amazing. It seems like I was just going through your IMDb over the last few days and earlier this morning to get freshed up. It seems like the director duo thing is kind of you've done it a lot, right? You've done it with
Yeah, it's
multiple
funny
different pairs. So.
it's funny you notice that,
4
because
times.
it is something I've thought about. I'm like, what is it? Why am I like the third wheel? But I like it. I like, I don't know. I just like the kind of conversation and how you can be a bit of a three-headed monster, and it's just also a thing I think that's like becoming more prevalent nowadays for whatever reason. I feel like there's a lot of directing duos, more so now than in, I don't know, maybe in the 60s or something. But yeah, and I can't explain why that is, and I can't really explain why I get director duos. It's just like kind of a funny quirk, but I like it because you can kind of, actually a duo explained it to me, this like step aunt, step nephew, Severin, Fiala and Veronica, I'm blanking on her last name. I always just call them Severin and Veronica. It's weird saying their last names. But anyway, this Austrian duo I worked with, they said they like it because when you have two directors, they can kind of like beat out what is the best idea together. You know? It's like there's no one who's, in theory, if it's a good relationship, like they can call bullshit on each other, or they could say, no, what about this idea? What about this idea? And sometimes you get that with a director and a DP, or a director and a writer, but in the thick of stuff on set, you know, it's often just the director, or in prep or whatever. And I don't know. I think there's something nice about like two directors being able to like kind of challenge each other and kind of ping pong ideas off each other, and bring different things to the table. Like every duo directors I've worked with, like they usually have different suits, you know, like different strong suits, and that's a good thing. You know, everybody has blind spots, and it's nice if you have someone right beside you who can kind of catch the blind spot or add something that you wouldn't have thought of yourself.
Have you ever been caught in between the two? Like one of the two has a very strong opinion in how the scene needs to be shot, and the other one has a very strong opinion, but in the contrary, or it doesn't happen like that.
I mean, maybe in like prep, I would say not so much in production, because once you're on set, you usually have all kind of agreed upon something. But maybe in prep when you're shot listing. But in that sense, I don't know if it's too dissimilar from like, you know, I have these questions with solo directors too. And sometimes, you know, we'll see a scene differently, but then we either compromise or find a way to figure it out. But yeah, it's not too dissimilar. And if that ever happens, you know, usually the directors might take a second and say, hey, you know, maybe we need to like get on the same page here. Let's like put a pin on this. We don't want to like, you know, I don't think any co-directing duo wants to use their DP as like their therapist, or they're like, you know, they're like, well, what does Lowell think? Whatever he thinks is the deal breaker. You know, I think it's usually just a moment where they realize like, oh yeah, we haven't talked about this or haven't sorted this out for ourselves, you know. So that, I feel like it's not too dissimilar from.
In the pairs, is there usually one, like you said, strengths, but is there usually one that's more the visuals director and one that's more the performance, or do they all kind of a lot of crossover, or they just kind of focus performance and trust you with the images?
It depends. Yeah, every co-directing duo has been different. You know, I can't be. It's. Yeah, it's, I don't know, because it might also be like one is really visual with action sequences and one is really visual with quiet moments or transition moments. And so, you know, it's hard to put like a label on it in that respect. But I think, you know, most co-directing duos figure out like who's going to be the one who, I don't know, talks the most to the first AD, or who's going to be the one who talks to the DP the most, or the actors the most, you know, or they might split things up. They might say, hey, okay, cut. Okay, you go talk to the actors. I'll go talk to Lowell, you know, and, you know, sometimes you see it happening in the fly or them discussing the approach. But yeah, you know, it's ever evolving, and it's hard to like, I wish I had like a better anecdote, but I don't, because it's just I've worked with a bunch, so, and they're all kind of different flavors.
That's fine. Yeah, everything's so different in our industry, so I'm sure, and yeah, nothing's a blueprint. Sorry, one me.
No, I was going to ask you about Knock at the Cabin, where the movie has a very similar feeling to Topside, in the sense that it's very unsettling. It's a movie that also it's unsettling and it's harsh to watch because of what's happening in there. But the shooting style, the camera work, the lighting, it's completely different. And that's something that I really liked when you watched the two movies back to back. It's like, oh, the same dude shooting, absolutely different. Also, the director is very different. It's a director that is known because of his visual style. How do you change hats in a situation like that and be so successful both sides?
Yeah, it's a great like distinction and juxtaposition to notice, and I think a lot of my career has been kind of like juxtapositions and me enjoying kind of like doing one thing in this lane and then kind of totally forgetting that and jumping to the other lane, and that's kind of, I think, the fun of being a DP is you kind of get to like have different kind of masters and teachers and collaborators and styles, and like I kind of like being a chameleon. But I think you're right, at the heart of it, like there's kind of this like family drama and this like ticking clock behind both of those movies, that I think, the directors are in large part responsible for. Knock at the Cabin is an interesting situation because I share credit with Jaron Blatchka on that. And in all fairness, like him and Knight sort of started the project, and then I came in halfway through on the back half. So a lot of those like creative decisions or just like ideation of the project had kind of been developed with them. I know Knight is like a big storyboard guy. He kind of visualizes everything in advance and like really does like live and die by the boards in many ways. And so he does a lot of that process solo and with a storyboard artist, and then I come in and help him, interpret, okay, this is what it is on the page, 2D, but when we do 3D, there might be a tree in the way, or that might not be the, from this angle, it might not be the most graphic composition or whatever. And so I think a lot of it was just kind of walking the set with him, actually nuts and bolts of like, okay, well, if it's this frame and, knowing, he knows when he's going to cut, he knows like a lot of this stuff in advance. He's a really talented, smart filmmaker in that way. But, just figuring out like the right tool, the right time of day, the right methodology, the right way to be efficient with our tools. Because a lot of the tools we use on Night Set, there's like no handheld in that movie. It's all like cranes or dolly track and things that kind of require a lot of pre-planning, pre-rigging, bigger crews. We shot on film. We shot with anamorphic lenses. Like it's just a kind of more technically, or they're both complicated movies to make, to be honest, but like Topside is complicated in the like lack of control aspect, whereas I think Knock at the Cabin is complicated in like full control and like everything is under a microscope kind of thing. And there's no background actors. Most of the movie, it's like 7 people, and slowly it gets whittled down to less and less people. So, in a set, and you can do anything. And so a lot of the process with Night is just deciding like, what aren't we going to do and what are we going to do, and what we are going to do, how are we going to do it so it's, super efficient telling the story, super minimalistic, and still has like an anxiety and a punch to it, like you said. So like keeping the camera always locked in and always moving and getting closer and closer and closer. I think that's part of the like dread and anxiety sometimes in that movie, is that like the camera doesn't let you cut away from either some action or some violence or and so it's just a very like trained eye, and that just takes a lot of deliberation and discussion and pre-visualization, which is I think why he does work from boards, because he does want to have a lot of control in the process and in the final outcome.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about that movie, was some of the stuff that's just out of frame. Like you push into a point where an action happens, not to spoil anything, just out of frame, and you know what's happening, and it's almost like oh, this is so uncomfortable because I know what's right there, but you're not letting me see it, and it makes it even creepier.
Totally.
Are those again completely boarded out, or on set you're like, hey, what would be cool is if we just off and you didn't see it, or is that him or
No, for the most part, like, for the most part, things like that, like I think part of what you're describing is like maybe a scene where someone dies. Like since there's only so many deaths in the movie and they're kind of big, statements in the movie and change the direction of the movie, like those were very preconceived, and thought out. Yeah, I'm like trying to think. There really wasn't too much like. There really isn't a lot of like improv, so to speak, on night sets. Like maybe for the actors, like maybe the actors can get in an extra line or two or something like that. But in terms of like what the camera is doing, it's pretty thought out. There wasn't really a time where we were like, oh, this shot isn't working. Or like, it's not to say we couldn't one up something. You can always one up something. You can always say, oh, this is working, but what might make it better is if we do X. But like in hindsight, like that wasn't wholly the process. Like it's sort of like once we made a decision, we stuck pretty hard to it. And like for example, like the scene between the two fathers, like their last moment in the cabin together, like the intention there was make something super intimate where you feel really connected to this person. And so we had one actor riding the dolly and we were using an eye direct system so that they could like look into the lens but see the actor right beside the camera. And like that was like what might seem like a simple shot. It was a huge rigmarole. We put down 20 feet of like, we didn't want any track so that they could move fluidly. So we put down all this dance floor on the ground. Like it was full 360. We had to light everything through the windows. It was, a ton of, and had the lightning effects going, and we were at minimum focus. Like the actor couldn't have moved all that much. We had this like rod system so they weren't getting too close to the camera but weren't getting far away. So it was like a really complicated process. So like once you've built all of that stuff, it's hard to be like, what, let's change it. It's sort of at that point you're like, we're here, we're doing it, and like it's working, and for the most part, I think that's what I've found is sort of that like big jump up, like from kind of without getting too much in the weeds, but like from sort of the indie world to the studio world, it's like a lot of it is just like kind of really making your bed with decisions and like putting in a lot of thought into what you want to do, because once you say go, like a lot of money is about to be spent, a lot of time and effort is going to go into it, and it's like I really hope it was the right decision because you're in it now, and so yeah, and I think that's, again, I feel like maybe I'm like belaboring the answer to this question, but like that's why the filmmakers at Topside wanted to make the movie in their style, because they wanted to have flexibility on set. They didn't want to feel like locked in, and they knew that there was going to be a lot of discovery in the edit, and so they shot digital. They do really long takes, whereas Night was like, I want a super locked in, focused movie. We're going to shoot film. We're going to have 4 minutes of mag or 10 minutes of mag, and that's it, and I'm committing, and so it's, they kind of were like two completely opposite movies now that you say it like that.
Completely different, but in a way, it's what it's fascinating is how two completely opposite approaches on filming style, camera work, lighting, everything, they can have such a similar feeling at the end. So there's again, there's many ways of.
Well, I think in part it's the story and the content too. It's like parents being put in the worst possible scenario and thinking, man, I could lose my kid could die. I think that in and of itself is like, boom, you've got a good thing that's a pressure cooker. Time is of the essence in both of these movies. I think it's something I've grown to appreciate a lot as a cinematographer. It's like, we all want a good script, but sometimes it's hard to know what makes a good script, or it's like, oh, this is good, but I don't know why, or this is bad, I don't know why. And I've realized like, yeah, that pressure cooker is one of those things you kind of need to make Act 2 start to kick into gear, and all the stakes get elevated and everything matter. And it's like that stuff matters as a DP. It matters to like see that and be able to find that in a script and then articulate it, because it will inform the shots you pick. Whether you know it or not, it will help you decide the right shot.
do you, now that you mentioned the script, do you have a process that you follow in every single movie, the same for going from the script to the pictures? Like, I read the script all the first time just like a book, and then I start dropping in images, or I take references, or I just, do you do something always the same, or you adapt depending on the movie?
I think I do, a lot of times what happens is I'm interviewing for something, so I have to prepare something. Um, or I got the movie, I know I'm working with my friends and I got it, and I might have some idea what they want to do. But, at the end of the day, I think it's important for any artist and collaborator to take a little stab at something and have a little bit of an idea of what could elevate it or make it exciting, or just talk about what you like about it. And so, yeah, I think my like individual process before I start working with a director, and also incorporating their process, right? Because they're going to tackle it their own way, and they might want to tackle it together in a certain way, like what we've been talking about. Yeah, I definitely like go through my own thing. I can't, I'm like really a nerd at the end of the day, and I love sheets and numbers and organization and bullet points and references. And so like I read a script and I'm always just jotting. Like, my first read, I really do try to appreciate it like I'm the audience member, and not just like stop every 5 seconds to write something. But if something makes me laugh, I write, oh, haha, like, or circle that, like, good joke. And I kind of just like I try to just take stock in my initial reaction, because that's the only time I'm ever going to like hear that joke for the first time or see that surprise for the first time. So I try to clock like what worked or what didn't, or maybe like that's a dumb joke, and then like keep going. And I really just like process my reaction, and maybe don't process like maybe I might say, oh, this would be cool in a oneer or something. But what I'm really saying is this is a tense moment, or this is a dynamic moment, right? I'm really, again, just like taking stock of my initial reaction. And then from there, I'll probably go through it again, reread those notes, bring those, like what I've started to do now more initially. I usually do this later, but now I feel like I've tried to get a little bit more prepared in my process, is I make like just a full breakdown of the script on Google Sheets, every single scene, every single heading, every single time of day. Okay, what time of day? Is it probably sunset? If it's sunset, is it actually when the sun is hitting the horizon? I might start to say like, what would be cool, or what does this look like in my head, and then start to jot notes. Like I want to be able to, when I talk to the director, when I take the interview, I want to be able to say like, oh yeah, in that scene where they're walking across the street, like there's this cool opportunity to do this, or I really noticed there's these 3 sections, and maybe this section is blue and this section's red and this section's yellow or something. Like I try to just be excited about a project, and I try to show everybody I've done a lot of thinking and a lot of like envisioning this movie. And then if I'm interviewing, I usually will put together like a lookbook as well, and that's when I start to get into the weeds of like, okay, what references, what is this going to look like? Maybe there's a tonal reference, but for the lookbook, I'm just going to put visual references. And so, I do a decent amount of that stuff for every project. I think before even booking it, I might do all this work and not get the job, So I really try to, just think through it and live in it, and like, be a part of that world. And then hopefully I get it, and then I've done my homework, and then I'm ready to like scout and stuff,
To steal one of Wanmi's favorites and what he asks all the time, and I know you're thinking it right now, that prep work you do, that lookbook that you've created in prep, once you actually get to set, does that follow you along, or is this something that it's baked into you now, you try to forget it and shoot the movie as you've already preconceived it?
Yeah, I guess a little bit of both. For the most part, like I don't really go back to my lookbooks, once we start filming. I think once you start filming, the thing becomes the lookbook itself. You're like, yeah, well, the last 5 scenes looked like this, so that's the movie now. And like, that's the target, and not whatever I thought of before. But yeah, I heard something Larry Fong said recently that I really like. Or no, it was David Mullen. David Mullen said something in an interview where he was like, be really prepared for the first 5 days of filming, know every single shot like the back of your hand, how you're going to achieve it, what it's going to look like, how you're going to light it. And then after that, like you can, I think you've kind of got it in your blood cells, and you can kind of like be a little bit less, not precise, like you can be a little bit more reactive and a little less prescriptive. And I kind of agree with that. It's like the first 5 days you're discovering, and in some movies we've done like skeleton crews the first days just to get the look, and then started day one, like I've done some like pre-shoots, or you do camera tests, and you do all these things to try to help you realize sooner what the movie is going to look like concretely. And then in theory you've done all the homework. You don't need to overthink it. You don't need to keep checking your notes. You just have to be like present, and obviously still know the plan and still know like, where you're going after a company move. But, in theory, you can let off the gas a little bit and like, just kind of enjoy the process of making it and be reactive and be like attuned to the movie and the crew and everything that's going on around you.
One of the things that I like most about, and I feel more connected to your reel, is that you have stuff like green grass that is completely full of color and like almost flat lighting, and then you go all the way to super dark places on top side, or some even in some episodes of Servant. And then you do commercials, you do music videos, and again, there's no uniformity, and I really, really like that because it feels like you enjoy shooting almost any kind of style. But is there any of those styles that you feel more comfortable with?
Well, thanks. First off, thank you. I appreciate that, and I agree with you. Like, I love being a bit of a chameleon. I kind of love, being able to say like, okay, on this movie, I'm wearing spandex. On that one, I'm wearing jeans. On this one, I'm wearing, outdoor wear. Like, it kind of is like you're designing it. A movie is like you're designing an outfit, and I kind of like, I don't want to just make the same outfit for every movie, So I like that. I like the versatility. I like, because that's also how you learn, if you do the same thing over and over, you might just get bored or use the same old tricks. But I kind of like that a commercial maybe makes you work with a new lighting designer and do some specialty lighting stuff that doesn't make sense in a movie, because like you wouldn't have that environment ever in a movie maybe. And then you do so many commercials and you're like, this is boring. I want to get back in the narrative, and it's good to kind of toggle on and off those things. But I don't know if I have, I think you've already like described what it is I'm looking for as at least consistency, which is just like whatever I make, I hope it is like propelling the audience and keeping them engaged and is exciting and hopefully novel or interesting. Like I really hope I don't make a movie that's boring or that people don't feel disconnected from, or like, oh, I hate that character. Why would I ever want to go on a journey with them? I hope I think to me that's probably still just the most important thing, is that I'd rather make an ugly movie that's like really captivating than a beautiful movie that's you turn off in 2 minutes, So I think that's like, I hope my style is just like making sure my cinematography is telling the most engaging version of the story.
Yeah. Yeah, we talk a lot about appropriateness of the look for the story and kind of story first mantra. You speak about being nerdy in the prep with like, charts and tables and organization. Are you kind of a gear nerd? Are you looking at the internet for all the latest camera drops and specs?
No, that's where it ends. Yeah. Like it really, I'm a nerd when it comes to like my creative process And sometimes it overlaps with like, oh, what can this rig do? Or what? How can we use a technocrane that hasn't been used before? Oh, can we put a technocrane on a technocrane? That's cool. Like I like, and people do it. That's not, I'm not making that up. But like I like concepts like that. Like I get really, like obsessive. There's a shot in Servant where someone falls and we wanted the camera to like fall with her and roll, and like that was a fun shot to design. Is it like, oh, we need the Cook S4 32, we need this camera, and because then the sensor size and the field of view will, like that. I'm like, nah, I don't know. A camera's a camera is a camera, a lens is a lens, a lens. But like, oh, can we use a bungee so that the thing doesn't fall super hard? It like stops itself before it like smacks down on the floor. Like that, I kind of get geeky about. I'm like, yeah, get a bungee. And then get the stunt harness, because that, like I like that stuff, because that to me feels really creative. And there's definitely creativity to be had in like sensors and lenses. Like there was a show, I haven't watched it, but I've watched the trailer a bunch. It's so cool. I'm ruining the story because I can't remember the name of the show, but it's this like Olivia Colman British black comedy crime drama thing called like The Diggers or something like that. And the DP like put a Sony Venice 90 degrees, so the sensor was 2:3, and then put 2 times anamorphics on it, and then it made the aspect ratio 4:3.
Wow.
But it was 4:3 full anamorphic using the entire sensor and the entire 2 times stretch of the lenses.
But
and
vertical
I was like,
flares?
That's genius.
Yeah.
No, because they just used the sensor.
Because they mounted the
They
anamorphic
were
the
just
camera
using
like
it
that.
like as if it was a vertical sensor.
wow.
So everything was still the right way. And I was like, that's
Yeah.
cool. And I'm like, that is something that excites me and I would geek out about. But like, I don't care that it's the Sony Venice and I don't care which anamorphics. It's just like that someone thought 2 times.
Sure.
You'd get 4:3 if you had a 2:3 sensor, and I was like, that's creative and geeky all in one, and only a DP could like think of that, So no, I'm not like really super up and up on like, and maybe to my own detriment, like I'm not super up and up on like what is like, I know there was a new Blackmagic camera that came out this week and I should know more about it, but I don't. And I'm sure when the time comes, hopefully I'll find that tool when I need it, But in terms of like what camera I want to shoot my next movie on, I usually just try to come to that decision or ask myself that question when I'm in that position. And then I hope that leads me to the right tool. And maybe it just leads me back to like the Alexa or 35. But like, sometimes you need a really specific tool, and then I'm willing to do that. Like, okay, let me search through the toolbox. Oh, there's a Blackmagic. Let me try that. And like, I try to think again, like just story first, and then here's a problem. Okay, what do I need to solve the problem, and then find the right tool.
Same with lenses. You don't have like a to-go comfort zone lenses, or you choose the lenses by project. You are the kind of guy who.
Okay, look, everybody has lenses they love.
Yeah, of course, yeah, me too.
Of course. And like, I'd be silly if I was like, yeah, Alexas are fine. Like, I love the Alexa. I love, the Sony Venice. They're great cameras. Shooting on film is super fun. I think lenses, I get a little bit more. I can be a little bit more honest because they are just so. There's some really special ones. Like, I just love Hawk anamorphics. Those are really, really special. There were these like vintage 1.3 Hawks too that are so cool. I love those. I don't have a go-to set, but when I have an excuse to use a favorite, yeah, sometimes I'll be like, oh, let's get the favorite in, let's get the Hawk in. This would be perfect for this project, But there are other times where, I'm like, yeah, ultra primes are perfect for this. I maybe don't think of something special when I think of ultra primes, but I think of those, and I with this story, those would be a good fit. Or like on Servant, we used a Komodo and ultra primes to match the main camera package, which was a Mini LF and Primo 70s, because we needed a camera that was 10 pounds or less to go in a really small gimbal, because we shot a whole episode in this car. And so, in that case, I kind of needed ultra primes. They served a really important purpose and function, and they also happened to kind of match pretty well with the Primo 70s. So I try to think of it like that, just more like what's the best tool for the job, and if it happens to coincide with something I really love and just find beautiful already, then great.
I, I'm a little bit like the same on that end. I'm not picky with the cameras. I think that choosing between an Venice or an Alexa, it's like choosing between a Ferrari and a Lamborghini. I mean, they're great both, but lenses is some sort of a more personal touch, and yeah, same.
Totally.
I do whatever is necessary for the job, whatever is best for the story, but there's always a bunch of lenses there that if you have the chance, you always. In my cases, are the Leica Sumiluxes.
The Sumiluxes are great, totally. So and the Summicrons, I've used those
Alex
a lot for
Alex
commercials.
likes funky lenses though.
I love funk.
Like?
You give me a reason to work in funkiness and more vintage anamorphics. I'm all for it, man. Yeah, there's a lot of
I think,
companies now specifically that are rehousing old kind of medium format or like still photography glass. It's awesome. I mean, just to take an example out of like current pop culture is like the whole Dune iron glass thing, where they were using old Soviet lenses rehoused. So.
Yeah, no, it's great, and like I think I sometimes go back and forth, where sometimes again I think I just react to the last thing I made, which sometimes like I'll make a greener grass and then I want to go make topside and then I want to go make knock at the cabin, but like I kind of like changing things up, and so sometimes I am like, oh, I love these vintage anamorphics, and then the next thing I'm like, I just want like clean sphericals, like let's just make a clean movie, and so it's I don't know, I think one of the best parts of just being a cinematographer today is there's so many tools available, and there's so many people willing to rehouse things and make new cameras on the cheap or whatever. Like there's just so many options, and it's a great time to be doing what we're doing.
Wanmi, we were having coffee a while ago, and Wanmi, you brought up one of your buddies or a colleague or somebody back in Spain that started like shooting shallow or pretty typical photography, and they got deeper and deeper and deeper as they got more into their career.
It's a Spanish cinematographer. It's a legend, Jose Luis Alcaine. He's a true legend in Spain, and he's probably 80, and he was, last time I checked, he was shooting a movie, T-Stop 16. So because he felt that he wanted
that's cool.
to have depth of field everywhere. He didn't want to have fussy pictures and stuff like that.
I mean, we all know Citizen Kane is one of the best movies. It was incredible looking at the time. It still is. Like, we don't need everything to be shallow. I'm actually like someone who kind of I've like LF and large format and all that has become a dominant player in the field, and I'm someone who's never really fully understood why or appreciated it, because I'm like, I don't want it to just be one eye and focus for every shot. Like topside, that never ever could have worked. Like we had to shoot low light, but we also needed this little girl's performance, and she's moving around, not on a mark or anything. Like it would have just been a focus puller's nightmare and an audience's nightmare. And there's some scenes where we highlight that, but for the most part, like, you need people to be in focus. Like, I don't know, I've always been someone who's like, I like seeing a face, like, maybe their ears out or not, like, who knows, depends on the scenario, but a handheld, moving, frenetic movie, you can only disorient the audience so much before they're like, I'm out, this is crazy, I can't see anything, I can't process it, it's making me sick, and so, like the filmmakers and I, we specifically for that movie chose the Alexa Mini because of its form factor and weight, and that it was 35. And then our next movie we wanted to make in a similar way, and we felt we needed 4K as a minimum, so we kind of ruled the Alexa Mini out. And the thing that was staring us in the face was then, okay, use the Mini LF. But I was like, it's bigger, it's heavier. It's shallower depth of field at the same T-stop. So I was really like trying to find a solution, but it felt like the only option for whatever reason. And so we ended up doing it, but I shot most of the movie at like a 4 for that reason. Whereas topside, I shot a lot of it at like a 2 or 2.8. So, already it influenced how I was going to shoot the movie. And luckily, the next movie we did, which comes out this fall, like it was mainly during the daytime. So, like, I could afford shooting at a 4 or 4.5, and then sort of getting the same depth of field that I had on topside.
I went through that process of when I started shooting movies. My entire obsession was to shoot wide open and like very shallow depth of field and stuff like that. And as I grew up as a person, as a DP, now I really feel uncomfortable to watch a movie where there's no focus. So I'm closer to, unless the story requires something very specifically shallow, I'm more towards the 4 than towards the 1.3 for sure.
I also just think focus is a tool, a narrative storytelling tool too. So, there's some movies that all want to be shot at the same stop, but like you're saying, maybe there's another movie where one scene is a 16, one scene is a 2.8. Like you can do anything. Like all options are on the table if you can justify them narratively, and so you don't have to just think of focus as this like locked in thing. You can think of it as like variable, or like you're saying, as per the scene needs. Like M. Night Shyamalan loves split diopter filters, and so we've done that where something in the foreground's in focus, something in the background, and like that can help tell the story or just be fun. So it just depends on the scenario.
We what we do, right? It's such a collaborative act. It comes from the directors, and then what we do, but then what we do takes so many technical crew members most of the time, like your focus puller, your gaffer key. Are there a few like must-haves that you try to get on each project, or is it you go to LA and you work with a certain crew over there, you work with your New York crew, or do you try to like, now I really need my focus puller? Is there like one?
I don't know. I've always sort of like, at first I think I was in envy when I'd hear DPs like fly their crews around the world, and they always have the same focus puller. Like that's a cool idea and I love that, but I've just never really been in that position. A lot of the time budget or tax incentives or whatever dictate to work with locals, and I've like just come to embrace that. I kind of like I just like the idea that a movie can be like you guys are in Cincinnati, like you guys want to be hired for jobs and like be a part of productions that come to your city, and I think that's kind of the environmentally sustainable way of doing things, and like I like kind of meeting people. You hire the local first, they know all the seconds in town, they know all the loaders in town, they know all the camera shops in town. Like there's an asset, that person's an asset. If you come in to a new place and bring everyone, then like you don't know anyone, and you have to do a lot of digging, and that can be time and labor intensive, and like can shoot you in the foot in some ways. And so like I've brought a crew member, I think one movie I've brought a B cam first and a B cam op, and that's it. Like that was the one time. Everything else I've pretty much used the crew that I've worked with before, or I've gone to a location again and I knew the crew from the previous movie, and so brought them on. But I don't know. I think there's an argument to be made for both. Just like a lot of the creative decisions we make. But for me, I just like, what I love about movies is meeting people, and I think and yeah, just trying to get to know a city, get to know new filmmakers, hear their input, and just involve myself in like the movie and in the time and place we're in, and that to me usually means like the local flavor of the crew and that, I don't know. I just like that. I feel honored enough that I get to get flown out. And it also like it just has budget implications. Like the reality of the thing is like even if you wanted to fly everybody out, that's usually not a possibility because they have to be housed and fed and all this stuff, and that's like yeah, it can just be a lot to ask. And it just depends on the project. If there was something super 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 technical, then maybe I would make an argument because there's someone I really really trust to get the job done. So it just depends, but I like it. Like I did a movie in Rome last year and I worked with an entire, Roman crew, and they were awesome. And like I was able to sort of like indoctrinate myself into their style of working and vice versa, and we learned a lot from each other and had a great time. And like I would totally go back and work with them in a heartbeat.
Did you have to have a translator, or did you just kind of enough of them speak English?
Yeah, there's a lot of English speaking Italians, but like I remember one day my key grip couldn't be there, and so the dolly grip bumped up to key grip, and like he didn't speak any English, and so like there were little individual like moments in relationships that maybe needed translating, but on the whole I didn't need like a translator. And if anything, I learned some Italian and would try to speak in Italian and give notes in Italian.
Isn't that the premise of the movie? The movie is I Don't Understand You, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it a comedy
you've
about
done your homework?
The comedy about the difficulty of
Yes,
Americans
totally.
in Italy?
Yeah. Yeah, what was really fun was like on our first day of filming, we were filming a scene that was all in English, and like some of the Italian crew, like my gaffer Diego, was laughing because he could hear the comedy in English, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's funny," like because he's gonna kill that guy or whatever. Like he could understand the even like puns and stuff, and then vice versa, we'd be filming a scene that had Italian and English language, and some people would laugh at the English joke, some people would laugh at the Italian joke. It was really funny how language sometimes transcended barriers, and how you could just tell that like, oh yeah, this movie's gonna work because like look, all the crew is laughing, they don't even speak this as a first language, and so it was the movie is kind of about miscommunications and people saying one thing but someone hearing the other thing, and it's cool. It's a fun movie.
I got a question about crew. Now that we're talking about crew, what's your relationship with the DIT? Are you the kind of DP that is on top of the DIT for every shot, or you just tell them, okay, this is what I want, and let them do their thing?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like, for the most part, I'm not really in that tent. Like the last thing I was just shooting, I was in the tent a lot, and I was just like, I don't want to be here. I want to be by the camera. Why am I here? Like it just kind of was like the nicest, closest monitor at times. But in terms of like my relationship with the DIT, I love my DITs. I know them well, but for the most part, like I kind of just need a data manager a lot of the time. Like every once in a while, if it's like matching funky lenses or two cameras, or okay, this camera was super backlit, this camera was super front lit, we need to like make them match a little bit. Like I almost treat it a little bit like the color suite, but in the hope is that I'm not really like, I don't like live grading. I think that's like overcomplicating things and too crazy. Like I kind of pick a LUT, maybe two LUTs, and stick with them, and I might go to the DIT tent if like something's wrong. Mm-hmm. But I don't really go to the DIT tent if everything's like working, mm-hmm. if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And if anything, I'm kind of more of a guy who likes to walk around the set with like a handheld monitor and like be in the action, be able to like kind of quickly adjust something. Like I kind of get, I can get a lot of, I can think through a lot of stuff, but then there are times where you're just in it and you're like, oh, we should move that flag, or I should bring in another flag. And it's like sometimes easier for me to communicate that if I'm right there on the set. So yeah, I don't know. And I also like to operate. So that's the other thing. Like a lot of times I'm just at the camera. So yeah, I just have never, I don't know. When I think of DPs and tents, I think of it as like sort of like a very impersonal and detached and maybe even like white glove kind of vibe. And I'm much more like, dude, I'll move the C-stand. I don't care. Why don't I push the dolly? And like, like I love just like being in the action and reacting, and just like being able to kind of jump quickly and just see things. Like I hate not being like, there are just times the camera's like pointed down at the floor and you're like, why is the camera pointed at the floor? Like, what are they doing? And I hate the feeling of just like, what is going on in that room where the action is actually happening, so I like to be in sort of the action in the center of it, and also be able to be like, oh, you know what, there's a vantage point up there. What if we get B cam up there? Or what if, like, you just can't see those opportunities if you're kind of holed away in a tent, I feel like.
You actually, I asked you the question because talking to you, it feels like that. It feels like you are a hands-on guy, like you want to be right where the camera is. So, and that most of the time means that you just trust someone just managing your images, and you'll go from there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love color, and I love the color suite. It's like my favorite place in the world to be. But I want to like color later. So. I don't want to like color now. I want to focus on like, what is the best performance now? What is the best lens now? What is the best angle? And then color later. Because it's just a totally different mindset. And I feel like on set, you have to be very present and focused on like the actual capturing of something, knowing that there's always room to massage a little, later. And yeah, I don't know. I think if you're at like in a tent, you're just gonna like go on your phone at some point, and you're gonna zone out, and you're gonna start chit chatting, and then something happened and you missed it, or like inspiration struck and it just totally passed you by.
Were you going like way back for a second? Your background, did you come up a certain track like AC route or lighting route, or did you like film school straight out into DP world?
No, yeah, I went to film school, and then I kind of did two things at the same time. Like, I shot just the lowest end, no pay, DSLR, stuff that never even saw the light of day, and, like, I would have gone hungry if that was my only option. So I did that track until that sort of gained momentum, and then at the same time, it worked my way through camera. So there was like a year where I just did anything anyone asked me, as a PA, as a truck driver, as a grip, whatever, you name it. And then I sort of like was able to kind of distill that and funnel that down into like, okay, I'm either going to data manage or second, maybe first, maybe op. And then those two tracks eventually kind of got to DP together, or like I could I'd meet someone as an AC and then later be able to like shoot their short, or whatever. It would just sort of like hop back and forth. But yeah, there was maybe like 4 or 5 years where I really didn't make much money or anything as a DP, but I supported myself as like an AC and met other DPs, and then they might recommend me for stuff. So there was a lot of like shadowing and learning, and yeah, like thinking about it now, like I was just in the action. Like I was often in camera department and like seeing the director and DP talk to the actors or pull focus and be part of the take. So I think that's just my like natural habitat,
Do you have any aspirations on directing one day?
Not really. Like, I think it's fun. I've done it once or twice, and there's something, really cool about it, but I don't know. I really love what I do, and I feel like there's just still so much I have yet to do in my domain and that I want to accomplish. And yeah, I just like the relationship I have with directors. I like there's a lot of weight that gets put on my shoulders, but not the entire weight of the movie, I don't know if I'm like jumping at that opportunity. And yeah, I don't know. I just also don't think I'm kind of most qualified. I think I'm most qualified to be a DP, not necessarily a writer or director, that sort of thing.
I know we talk about this a bunch. Like, I would love to do a Western. I love horror films. Is there like one thing that you haven't done yet where you're like, God, if I just get that chance, I'm going to crush it?
Yeah, it's funny. I've said this so many times and I hate my answer, but it's just true. It's like a car commercial. Like, I would just love to just be like whipping down the road, or like a James Bond movie where you're just like going 90 miles per hour with a camera and like the car is going, like there's something about that that's just like the little boy in me is like fast cars, that's fun, you know. Like that again, I hate my answer because it's kind of so stupid and rooted in dumb TV spots, but like that just sounds kind of fun, you know. I don't know. Yeah, like in actuality, you know, I just want to, yeah, if I could shoot like a Children of Men tomorrow or something, like totally. Like just big world building, sci-fi action with emotional heart, all that stuff, totally, you know. Um, yeah, I don't, but I'm also like, I like the surprises. I like when a script comes to you and you're just like, whoa, I wouldn't have thought of doing like a rom-com between like a robot and a dog, but I love it, and like this is great, and let's do that, and like this is actually really cool in its own unique way. So like, you know, yeah, I don't, I try not to be too prescriptive. Like I think we all should have like a North Star and things we're setting our sights toward, but I'm okay with, you know, the magic of like collaboration and the magic of just stuff of like the universe conspiring to put the script in front of you. I kind of like when something unexpected comes my way.
And what's next in your DP world now?
We'll see. I have a feature that's maybe gonna go this summer, but that would be exciting because that would be with a friend who's directing his like first narrative fiction movie, who comes from the doc world. Like commercials, I have some commercials coming up. So we'll see. I always get worried talking about stuff because I would hate to like be on the show talking about it and then like it either didn't happen or
Yeah, I understand.
or it fell through or something, you know, like it's also I'm not like I'm not a believer in a lot, but I also just feel like you have to hold things kind of lightly and not, you know, be too gung-ho and holding it tight and saying like, oh, this is happening and I'm doing it, because you just never know. Like it's kind of a crazy time in the industry right now.
It's,
you know?
yeah, it's bananas right now. It's very, everything is very
Yeah.
strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it sounds
yeah.
like you find joy in like the process, the actual just craft of doing it, which is kind of a great attitude. Yeah. Like
Yeah, I
the
mean,
challenges.
what else do you control? You don't really, and even that process you don't control a lot. Or I was telling you about processes where I've like thrown control out the window. So like, I feel like it's all you have is kind of what happens between roll and cut. You don't really have a say in like what you know, what comes of the movie. If you get an agent or if you get a festival premiere or whatever, like you just never know. And so I feel like I'm just always focused on the task at hand and the project at hand, you know.
And also, I mean, we are the luckiest people on earth to get to do what we
Totally.
do. I mean,
1000%.
how many people get paid to play every day and to create every day and to do what they love? I think our duty is to honor that and to respect that and to be hands-on in every single shot of the movie. So it's
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on me. Like, it's just the best job in the world. And, like, that's why when you're like, do you want to direct? I'm like, no, I already have the best job in the world. Why do I want to direct?
that will be exactly my answer, but I have to ask because in listening to you and listening how passionately you talk about not only shooting the movie but creating the shots and creating the narrative, it may be something there where you go like, yeah, my next step will be directing a movie. I have exact same opinion as you. I already have the best job in the world. I don't want somebody else's job, but yeah, some people do. Some people have that
Totally.
inspiration.
And I think I've met like a TV director or DP or two who've been like, yeah, at a certain point, you're like, I'm the most experienced one here. I know best. I want to run the show. And like, maybe I'll get there at some point, but I don't think so. I think what I enjoy about being a DP is like, yeah, working with directors who are coming from very different places and listening to them and trying to give them a process and an experience in a movie that only they could make, you know. And I think if I was directing, then I'd be like, well, yeah, I already know what I'm going to do, or I already, you know, it feels like I don't know, like uninspiring in a way. Whereas like I love meeting a director and being like, wow, you're so inspiring. I want to like work with you in your way, or I want to, you know, work on this together, and I want to, yeah, you're going to do something I would have never thought of, and vice versa. You know, I think that's the hope.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time it's not about the experience or like number of days someone's had on set, right? It's the specificity of the vision. Like if you can be, you can absolutely tell everyone on set, this is the movie we're making, even if this is day one, like that's the type of person I want to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I almost prefer people who have limited experience in film sometimes, because they usually think of things a little differently, and challenge me to think differently, you know.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us. I'm a big fan of your work. Actually, the decision of what people we invite to the podcast, it's lately been like what movies we like. Let's invite those people, and you were gracious enough to come here and talk to us. So thank you so much. I'm gonna keep watching your movies and enjoying them as much as I do now. And
thanks, man. I'm so thankful you guys asked me. Thanks, and truly thanks for watching Topside. Like Topside is one I really, really love, and I feel like it was hard because it came out around the time of the pandemic, and so obviously there's bigger things going on in the world. But yeah, it's one of those movies that I'm like, I feel like it kind of got lost a little bit, but it's cool to hear that, you know, you guys were able to find it. And
I feel like I need to prep everybody that I'm going to recommend it to, though. Be like, hey, you need to see this, but like, take a couple deep breaths first, especially if you have kids. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like one of my favorite movies is how am I forgetting the name? It's the Derek Sion France movie that he first made with Ryan Gosling. Gosh, how am I forgetting the name?
The Place Beyond the Pines?
No. He made 2 movies before that. God, what is it called? Anyway, I'm ruining the story, but like, it's one of those movies where you're like, oh my God, that just kicked my teeth in and my heart in, and like, but I love it, you know? Or like the movie
Blue Valentine.
Blue Valentine.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I know it's blue, but I kept thinking blue is the warmest color. Yeah, Blue Valentine, or We Need to Talk About Kevin. Like that movie is so hard to watch.
Yeah.
Even Killing of a Sacred Deer, like really hard movie to watch, but like a movie I really love and just think is incredibly well made, and so yeah, it's those are the movies I like, and so hearing you guys talk about a movie I made like that is really exciting.
Yeah, count
so
Topside
thanks.
among that tier. Yeah.
Oh man, I don't know about that, but it is cool.
Here it's emotional. Yeah.
Oh,
so
that's cool. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Cool.